Fence Hole by R. Anthony. Chapter 1. A New House. Nestled in the most exclusive enclave of Sacramento, California, Brett Thompson's freshly acquired house sat proudly on its perfectly landscaped lot. The charming bungalow, with a stately wraparound porch, was the culmination of years of hard work, sacrifice, and tireless dedication to his craft as a physical therapist. As Brett parked his cherry-red Jeep Wrangler in the cobblestone driveway, he could hardly contain the mixture of pride, relief, and sheer excitement that bubbled within him. Brett stepped out of the Jeep and surveyed the property, admiring the meticulous attention to detail paid to each shrub, flower, and tree. The sweeping expanse of green grass beckoned him to indulge in a sun-soaked picnic or a lively game of croquet. The secluded backyard, hidden from prying eyes by towering magnolia trees, promised an intimate sanctuary just begging to be explored. Curiosity piqued, Brett's gaze lingered on the inconspicuous hole between his property and the neighboring yard. His pulse quickening, he couldn't help but wonder who might be living on the other side of this mysterious portal. Brett cautiously approached the hole, its careful construction and precise dimensions hinting at the deliberate design of its creator. Leaning in, he caught a glimpse of the neighboring yard beyond. It was meticulously landscaped, every inch as immaculate as his own. Suddenly, his breath caught in his throat as a vision emerged from the shadows. There, shirtless and glistening with sweat, stood a very attractive figure, the man who lived next door. He was robust and muscular, his flushed, sun-kissed skin stretched taut over taut muscles, revealing years of hard labor and dedication to maintaining his home. A bead of sweat trickled down the sculpted lines of his chest and abs, disappearing into the waistband of his well-worn jeans. Joe Wilson, as Brett would soon learn, was a man of many facets. He was a doting husband, a proud father, and a consummate professional. But beneath that strong, confident exterior lay a man of insatiable desires, a man on the verge of a midlife crisis, a man yearning for something more, something utterly forbidden. Joe, seemingly oblivious to Brett's presence, continued his tasks, the muscles in his arms rippling as he wielded his garden tools with ease. Brett's eyes were drawn to the raw masculinity of the scene before him, something primal and instinctive stirring within him as he took in the sight of this ruggedly handsome man. Back and forth Joe moved, each step a dance of seduction, each flex of muscle a tantalizing glimpse of the forbidden pleasures that lay just beyond Brett's reach. Brett's heart hammered against his ribs, his breath growing shallow as he drank in the sight of his ruggedly handsome neighbor. But no matter how tempting the offer, no matter how badly he wanted to throw caution to the wind and indulge in this secret illicit fantasy, he knew that he couldn't. He had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let his guard down now. With a silent curse, Brett tore his gaze away from the captivating scene before him and forced himself to focus on the task at hand. He moved with purposeful determination, his once idle hands now busy unloading boxes and arranging furniture, as he willed his thoughts away from the tantalizing distraction that lay just beyond the fence. Despite his best efforts, however, the image of Joe's shirtless, sweat-slicked form lingered in his mind, a steady drumbeat of desire pulsing through his veins. It wasn't long before the sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel driveway drew Brett's attention. Turning, he caught sight of Joe approaching, his muscular form now clad in a simple white t-shirt and well-worn jeans. Joe's eyes twinkled with warmth as he extended a hand in greeting.
"Hey there. I'm Joe. Welcome to the neighborhood."
Brett hesitated for a moment, his pulse still racing from the forbidden fantasies that had just moments before consumed his every thought. But as he took in the genuine nature of Joe's smile and the earnestness in his eyes, he couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over him. With a firm handshake, he returned the introduction.
"I'm Brett. Nice to meet you, Joe,"
Brett replied, doing his best to steady his voice and hide the tumultuous emotions roiling within him. Joe's gaze lingered on him for a beat too long, as if searching for something unspoken between them. But then, just as quickly as it had come, the moment passed, and Joe's easygoing smile returned.
"I couldn't help but notice you checking out my yard earlier.
Joe said, his voice laced with a playful teasing that made Brett's heart skip a beat. Brett felt his face flush with embarrassment.
Oh, I was just,
He stammered, unable to find the right words to explain the forbidden thoughts that had been running through his mind. Joe smiled knowingly, his eyes gleaming with mischief.
It's okay. Everyone thinks my backyard is immaculate.
Brett wasn't sure if he was talking about Garden or his perfectly shaped glutes. He almost laughed out loud at the thought but managed to keep his composure.
Ha ha! Yeah, it's really something.
Brett finally said, impressed by his ability to keep it together.
I just moved in, and I can't wait to get started on my own garden. I've always had a passion for plants.
Joe's eyes lit up with excitement.
Oh, really? That's great to hear. I'm always happy to share tips and advice with a fellow green thumb. If you ever need any help or guidance, just don't hesitate to ask.
Brett smiled, grateful for the neighborly advice.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm sure I'll be coming to you for advice quite a bit. I'm still getting the hang of this whole gardening thing.
Joe chuckled, his eyes twinkling with warmth.
Don't worry. We all start somewhere. I remember when I first started working on my yard, I hardly knew the difference between a weed and a flower. But with a little practice and a lot of patience, I've managed to turn this place into a little slice of heaven.
Brett couldn't help but be drawn in by Joe's enthusiasm and passion for his work. He had never met a man like Joe before, someone who was so unapologetically in touch with his emotions, who took such pride in his home and his appearance, and who exuded such a powerful and magnetic energy. Brett found himself wanting to learn more about Joe, to unlock the secrets that lay hidden beneath that charming exterior. As they chatted, Brett couldn't help but notice the way Joe's eyes seemed to sparkle with warmth and intelligence, the way his laugh filled the air with a rich, contagious joy. He marveled at the way Joe's muscles rippled beneath his t-shirt as he gestured animatedly, the way the sunlight seemed to catch the golden flecks in his deep green eyes. But just as Brett was starting to feel comfortable in the conversation, the crunch of gravel interrupted the easy rhythm between them. Brett's heart sank as he turned to see Jessica's familiar red convertible pulling into the driveway.
Jessica, Brett's girlfriend of 2 years, was the picture of California cool, her long blonde hair cascading over her shoulders like a golden waterfall, her sun-kissed skin glowing with a healthy radiance. But beneath that perfect exterior, Brett couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing between them. A spark that once burned brightly, now reduced to a flickering ember. Jessica smiled brightly as she emerged from the car, her eyes taking in the two men chatting in the driveway.
Hey, babe. I didn't know you had company.
Jessica said, her voice artificially bright. Brett's heart sank as he realized he had been so caught up in his conversation with Joe that he had forgotten all about Jessica. He quickly introduced the two, feeling a twinge of guilt as he watched their eyes size each other up.
Nice to meet you, Jessica. I was just helping Brett with some gardening tips. He's new to the neighborhood.
Joe said, extending his hand.
Ah, I see.
Jessica replied, feigning interest as she shook Joe's hand limply.
Well, it was nice meeting you, Joe. I'm just going to steal Brett away for a bit, if you don't mind.
Joe smiled politely, but Brett could see the disappointment in his eyes.
Of course, Jessica. It was nice meeting you too. Brett, I'll let you get back to your girlfriend. Stop by any time if you have any questions about the plants or anything.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Brett replied, feeling a tinge of sadness as Joe walked away, leaving him alone with Jessica. Brett had been so caught up in the moment that he hadn't realized how much time had passed. And now he found himself torn between his undeniable attraction to Joe and his obligation to his long-term girlfriend. As they walked arm in arm towards the house, Brett couldn't help but feel that something had shifted between him and Jessica. With Jessica, the physical connection was a wildfire hot, intense, but ultimately fleeting. Yet, a part of Brett craved something more, a foundation deeper than just traditional lovemaking. He felt a hollowness within, a void Jessica's presence couldn't seem to fill. Instead of the overwhelming desire he initially felt when seeing her, Brett couldn't suppress the irresistible yearning that arose each time he came across his neighbor's alluring figure. He realized his infatuation with his neighbor was growing stronger, despite attempting to suppress it. Brett spent days lost in thought, wondering whether he had developed feelings for Joe, or if these emotions stemmed solely from his longing for the sparks that eluded his relationship with Jessica. Brett knew he had rushed into being exclusive with Jessica, as he didn't want to lose her after too long. While entwined with Jessica, Brett couldn't shake the image of Joe in his mind, a vivid memory that fueled his passion as he surrendered to the intimacy of their lovemaking. With closed eyes, he immersed himself in the fantasy of Joe's captivating form, his imagination breathing life into the desires that pulsed within him. Jessica exclaimed breathlessly,
My, you are certainly in the mood. What is that about?
Brett remained silent, Joe's enticing image swirling in his mind, a distraction that left him unable to respond to Jessica's inquiry. Finally, he replied, his voice tinged with uncertainty.
I'm not sure. Maybe the oysters from yesterday? Who knows?
Deep down, Brett had understood all too well the true source of his heated desire. Chapter 2. Backyard Project. Faced with the task of upgrading his backyard, Brett turned to Joe for assistance, knowing the allure of beer and food would entice him to lend a hand. As they discussed plans over cold brews, a subtle tension simmered beneath the surface, their shared desire for the project mingling with unspoken desires. Joe's suggestions added fuel to the fire, his ideas for more perennial plants, a Japanese pine, and a discreet shed, igniting a spark of excitement in Brett's chest, each detail bringing them closer to the edge of something more than just landscaping. As the sun beat down mercilessly, Brett and Joe toiled in the yard, their bodies glistening with sweat, muscles flexing with every movement, emanating a raw, primal allure. Brett's sunglasses shielded his eyes, veiling the intensity of his gaze as he stole glances at Joe, unable to resist the magnetic pull of his rugged physique. Meanwhile, Joe's own shades concealed any hint of desire, masking the heat that simmered beneath the surface. Their shared task became a dance of tension and desire, each moment pregnant with unspoken longing as they worked side by side, the air thick with anticipation. Despite the scorching heat, a different kind of heat crackled between them, their sunglasses serving as a barrier to conceal the hunger that burned within, a silent agreement to keep their desires hidden, even as their bodies pulsed with mutual attraction. As they labored under the sweltering sun, sweat clinging to their taut bodies like a second skin, Brett and Joe worked to install the shed at the edge of the backyard, just a few feet in front of the hole in the fence. Joe probably had an ulterior motive with his suggestion, laden with unspoken implications that sent a thrill coursing through Brett's veins. The shed loomed like a silent sentinel, its presence casting a shadow over the secluded corner of the yard, where whispered secrets and clandestine desires could take root unseen by prying eyes. With each swing of the hammer and every nail driven into place, the tension between them crackled like electricity, their shared knowledge of the shed's hidden purpose adding a layer of excitement to their work. As they stepped back to admire their handiwork, a charged silence enveloped them, the air thick with anticipation. Behind their sunglasses, their eyes met, an unspoken understanding passing between them, a silent invitation to explore the forbidden possibilities that lurked within the shadowy confines of the shed. Brett and Joe had been working tirelessly in the yard, and the sun was starting to dip low in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow on the freshly turned earth and newly planted shrubs. Exhausted but satisfied with their progress, Brett leaned back against the newly built shed, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over him. Joe, equally spent, wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand and flashed Brett a weary smile.
Well, we did it. That shed looks great,
Joe said, his chest heaving as he admired their handiwork. Brett couldn't help but agree. Together, they had transformed the backyard into an oasis of greenery and tranquility, their shared vision bringing the space to life in a way that neither could have achieved alone.
We did indeed.
Brett replied, his gaze lingering on Joe's sweat-slicked chest and arms. He quickly looked away, afraid that Joe might catch him staring. As the sun dipped lower in the backyard in a golden hue, Jessica emerged from the house bearing a tray laden with ice-cold beers and sizzling barbecue. Oblivious to the charged atmosphere swirling between her boyfriend, Brett, and their neighbor Joe, she greeted them with a warm smile, her presence a temporary distraction from the palpable tension that simmered just beneath the surface. With each casual exchange and shared sip of beer, the tension between Brett and Joe seemed to have amplified, invisible yet potent in the air. Jessica, unaware of the unspoken desires that hung heavy in the air, moved between them effortlessly, her laughter filling the space with a semblance of normalcy. But beneath the facade of casual camaraderie, the longing glances exchanged between Brett and Joe spoke volumes, their unspoken connection threatening to unravel at any moment. As Jessica bustled about, her attention focused on the grill, the tension between the two men continued to build, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. As the clock neared 9 in the evening, casting a soft glow across the room, Jessica prepared to depart for her night shift in the emergency room, her physician's coat hanging by the door like a cloak of duty. Meanwhile, Joe bid his farewells, slipping away to his home next door with the excuse that his wife needed his assistance in tucking their children into bed, leaving the air tinged with a sense of quiet obligation. As Jessica pulled out of the driveway in her red convertible, Brett found himself working overtime to suppress the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions that threatened to burst forth from within. A gaming session with his closest friend, Alex, proved to be the perfect distraction, and as they progressed through the vast open world of Red Dead Redemption 2, Brett discovered a newfound appreciation for the artistry of cinema and animation. Brett lingered a while longer into the night, the glow of the backyard lights casting long shadows as the clock ticked past 10:30. As he moved to switch off the lights, a faint sound caught his attention, a subtle rustling emanating from the corner just beside the shed. Instinctively, his senses heightened, his pulse quickening with a surge of adrenaline. For a fleeting moment, his mind raced with thoughts of intruders and potential danger lurking in the darkness. Yet, as he drew nearer, a familiar scent wafted through the air, the faint aroma of Joe's deodorant mingling with the night breeze, dispelling his initial fears. With cautious steps, he made his way behind the shed, the tension of the moment palpable as he stood in silence, waiting for what would come next. Chapter 3. Fence Glory Hole. In the dimly lit space behind the shed, Brett's senses were heightened, his heart pounding with anticipation as he detected movement on the other side of the fence. With a seductive allure drawing him closer, he approached the wooden barrier, the hole serving as a tantalizing invitation to indulge in forbidden desires. As he peered through the gap, a single finger emerged, tapping rhythmically against the bottom of the opening, beckoning him closer with a silent promise of pleasure. Succumbing to the intoxicating pull, Brett pressed his body against the fence, his throbbing arousal straining against the fabric of his pants. With a quick, urgent motion, he unzipped his trousers, exposing his hardened length to the unseen figure on the other side. With bated breath, he slid his erection through the hole, the thrill of the unknown, sending shivers of anticipation coursing through his veins as he awaited the illicit touch that awaited him. Suddenly, a warm, wet sensation enveloped his tip, a tongue swirling skillfully as it explored every inch of his pulsating shaft. A gasp escaped his lips as he surrendered to the exquisite pleasure, his hips thrusting instinctively as the unknown entity consumed him whole. He heard a low, guttural growl emit from the other side, the throaty purr igniting a desire deep within him that he could no longer suppress. The sound of their combined moans filled the air, a symphony of primal lust and forbidden longing. The thrill of it, the sheer audacity, only served to heighten the experience, making each stroke of that skillful tongue feel like an electric charge coursing through his veins. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the wet caress disappeared, leaving Brett panting and desperate for more.
Fuck, don't stop!
He hissed, his fingers gripping the fence as he fought to maintain control. A low masculine chuckle, muffled and nearly inaudible, was the only answer he received. But the brief silence that followed was all it took for him to fully comprehend the gravity of the moment. His heart raced as he felt the unknown entity close in around him, their hot breath ghosting along his length, driving him mad with the promise of untamed desire. He could feel the presence of a hand, the unspoken intimacy of the touch, setting every nerve in his body alight. The touch, warm and teasing, started its descent. Then, slowly, tortuously, it darted back up towards the tip, swirling around it before slipping back down again. Brett had never experienced such raw, primal excitement coursing through his veins, igniting a tingling heat that seemed to consume every inch of his body. The anticipation of this forbidden encounter surpassed anything he had ever known, eclipsing even the most pleasurable sensations of his girlfriend's skilled ministrations. Knowing who was on the other side, yet unable to make out their face or fully control the experience, filled him with a heady blend of terror and ecstasy. This was dangerous. This was reckless. This was absolutely fucking incredible. Without warning, a hunger exploded within him, swiftly devolving from anticipation to an insatiable craving.
Suck it,
He demanded, scarcely recognizing his own voice. At his command, the unknown entity swallowed his full audacity, drawing him to the brink of release. As Brett teetered on the brink of ecstasy, the mouth released his throbbing flesh, its tantalizing movements sending waves of desire coursing through him, his arousal flexing and pulsing with a desperate plea for more. The man on the other side of the fence expertly teased and tantalized, releasing Brett only to resume with a renewed fervor, prolonging the exquisite sensations and sending waves of heightened sensitivity and pleasure coursing through him. With each touch, Brett's tip throbbed, releasing copious amounts of pre-cum as his arousal surged to new heights. As the voice hummed on the other side of the fence, Brett's senses were heightened, recognizing it as Joe's. A surge of anticipation and tension coursed through his body, his muscles tightening in anticipation of what was to come. With each release and resumption of Joe's skilled ministrations, Brett's arousal intensified, his cock throbbing with desperate need. When Joe's mouth released him once more, Brett's control shattered, unable to contain the impending eruption any longer. He convulsed as he released a torrent of ecstasy, his essence spurting forth uncontrollably as Joe's tongue resumed its tantalizing dance along the underside of his cock. Another orgasm built within him, tension coiling tighter with each swipe of Joe's tongue. Brett gasped for air, his mouth agape and his eyes rolling back in blissful surrender as waves of pleasure cascaded through him, every touch of Joe's tongue sending electric shocks of ecstasy coursing through his trembling flesh. Brett's member swelled to its full, throbbing potential, each pulse of desire rippling through him uncontrollably. It wasn't just one orgasm. It was a symphony of ecstasy, his first foray into the realm of multiple orgasmic bliss.
Oh, Jesus.
Brett's voice quivered in a hushed whisper, the words escaping his lips like a fervent prayer.
Oh, fuck.
He gasped, overwhelmed by the intensity of his release. On the other side of the fence, Joe eagerly swallowed every drop, savoring the taste of Brett's essence as if it were the most exquisite nectar, his hunger for more palpable in the air between them. Brett slowly pulled away, his breathing ragged as he tried to regain control of his shattered senses. As the waves of ecstasy subsided, he carefully tucked himself back in, the weight of his actions casting a heavy cloud over him, although it was a veil of temptation that he wanted to explore further. Brett's heart raced, nerves tingled, and skin burned from savoring the depths of their passionate tryst, but he felt an unfamiliar guilt gnawing at him. He deeply desired to cross lines and submit to this undeniable attraction, but at the same time, he feared the unknown consequences. Brett heard Joe's zipper closing and muffled footsteps retreating into the darkness. His heart pounded louder. A desperate yearning overtook him, prompted by curiosity, temptation, and pleasure-riddled desire. Flushed with a mix of shame and desire, Brett hurried back to the house, his steps quickened by a torrent of conflicting emotions swirling within him. Under the cascading water of the shower, he sought solace, each droplet a cleansing balm for the sin and the lascivious act he had just partaken in. Despite the weight of guilt pressing down on him, the memory of the intense pleasure lingered, leaving him drained yet strangely sated. Exhausted from the tumultuous whirlwind of sensations, he surrendered to the soothing embrace of the water, seeking refuge from the storm raging within his soul. Chapter 4. Keep it on the down low. Brett could not fathom the fact that Joe's talented mouth had been his salvation so many times, igniting a fierce hunger that threatened to destroy the delicate balance of his relationships and the moral fabric of his being. Over a few months, Brett continued to get blowjobs from Joe, wrestling with guilt and desire, which became more intense with each passing day. The secrecy of their clandestine encounters only served to heighten the allure, the danger fueling the flames of their passion and binding them together in an unspoken covenant of carnal desire. Brett found himself trapped in a web of his own making, his infidelity consuming him from the inside out. As he struggled to maintain the veneer of a perfect marriage, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he was betraying Jessica. Their relationship, though genuine in moments of intimacy, had become a mere facade, an intricate stage production founded on secrets and lies. Brett's internal turmoil manifested itself in the form of sleepless nights and anxious days, his restless thoughts consuming him from within. He had never experienced anything as exhilaratingly terrifying as his illicit affair with Joe, and now he was hooked, chasing that elusive high like a junkie, unable to break free from its malicious grip. Brett's love life had transformed into a twisted chaos that threatened to engulf him, consuming every last ounce of strength and self-control. In the suffocating darkness, under the shroud of deceit, the forbidden nature of his tryst with Joe only seemed to amplify the euphoria that coursed through his veins each time they tangled together, their sweat-slicked bodies and gasping breaths harmonizing in a symphony of dark pleasure. Despite his burgeoning feelings for Joe, Brett was torn between two worlds, acutely aware of the gap that separated the tenderness of his affair from his marital duties. The pressure of his secret life threatened to unravel the fragile threads of his existence, weaving a labyrinthine deception that would soon entwine others in its intricate web. One day, while indulging in one of their secret rendezvous, Joe broached a new topic, inquiring if Brett would be interested in collaborating on an addition to his house, a storage shed for the tools and equipment that had slowly accumulated over the years. The project, innocuous enough in appearance, hid a tantalizing secret, one that would necessitate their presence on opposite sides of the wooden divider, providing countless opportunities for stolen touches and longing glances, fueling the forbidden flame that burned between them. Brett, knowing he was risking his already fractured relationship with his wife Jessica and jeopardizing his standing in the community, felt powerless to resist the magnetic pull that Joe exuded. He soon found himself agreeing to partner on the building project, sealing their illicit pact in the steamy confines of the shed-turned-sex dungeon. As the first day of construction approached, Brett nervously awaited Joe's arrival. He couldn't shake the idea that their surreptitious encounters had only amplified the allure of the shed project, transforming their shared purpose into a perverse game of cat and mouse. With each passing day, Brett's anticipation building, his thoughts consumed by the tantalizing prospect of stolen moments between hammer swings and drill bits. When the sun finally rose on the day of their first collaboration, the air lay heavy with unspoken desires and desperate longing. Their greetings were casual, their voices subdued, as if the shed itself knew of their secret plans. Brett and Joe exchanged terse, perfunctory remarks, but beneath their feigned nonchalance, an electric charge pulsed, crackling in the air between them. They began unloading their tools, the sound of metal clinking against metal echoing through the otherwise silent backyard. Their movements were deliberate, almost rehearsed, as if they'd been secretly preparing for this moment all along. The weight of the tools in their hands became an extension of their bodies, grounding them in the sultry reality that brewed between them. As sweat trickled down Brett's brow, his eyes wandered aimlessly, taking in the broad definition of Joe's muscular back and shoulders. For a fleeting moment, he imagined tracing the contours of his body with his tongue, savoring the taste of salt and sweat as his hands explored the depths of Joe's muscular form. He exhaled slowly, trying to ignore the heat pooling between his legs as his excitement grew.
You okay, man?
Joe asked, glancing over his shoulder at Brett, his eyes shimmering with concern.
Yeah, just caught a whiff of something weird, though.
Brett replied, waving a hand in front of his face to dispel the erotic fog that had clouded his thoughts.
Must be the chicken shit fertilizer I just used for the lawn.
Brett nodded, masking his disappointment behind an artificial look of interest. The aroma of the fertilizer that Joe had mentioned seeped through the air, a stark reminder of the task they had to complete. He cursed his luck, as his incredibly inappropriate fantasies were now skidding to a halt in favor of mundane realities. As they worked tirelessly throughout the day, their bodies grew weary, but their energy seemed to regenerate with each stolen glance between them. After weeks of laboring side by side, their bodies bathed in sweat and their muscles taut with anticipation, the project was finally complete. With a shared glance filled with unspoken longing, they retreated inside the new storage room, the click of the door locking behind them echoing in the air like a promise of secrecy. In the dimly lit confines of the room, their lips met in a hungry, fervent kiss, igniting a firestorm of desire that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. With a hunger that could not be quenched, Joe's mouth trailed down Brett's neck, his teeth nipping gently at the stubbled skin, leaving a trail of fire in his wake. An unspoken agreement had led them here, to this place of wanton pleasure, the forbidden storage room that bore witness to their darkest desires. As they groped one another, their touches frantic and greedy, they tumbled to the floor, their bodies entwined in a passionate dance that defied the boundaries of tradition and convention. Joe, fueled by an insatiable hunger, lifted Brett's shirt, exposing the tanned expanse of his abs. With a flick of his wrist, he sent the fabric flying, revealing the trembling flesh beneath. Joe leaned down, his breath hot and heavy, as he took one of Brett's nipples into his mouth. His tongue swirled around the sensitive bud, savoring the taste of sweat and desire. As Joe suckled, his fingers danced over the neglected nipple, tweaking and teasing until both nubs stood at attention, begging for more. Brett, unable to contain his gasps of pleasure, writhed beneath Joe, their bodies grinding together in a heated frenzy. He arched his back, urging Joe to take more of him in, and the other man obliged, swallowing him down with a low growl that reverberated through Brett's very core. Joe's hand snaked its way down to Brett's crotch, cupping the hardened bulge that strained against the fabric of his jeans. Brett's breath hitched as Joe deftly undid the button and zipper, freeing his throbbing cock from its denim prison. With a quick, deliberate motion, Joe tugged the jeans down Brett's legs, leaving him clad only in his black boxer briefs. Joe pulled back momentarily, his eyes trailing a path from Brett's impassioned gaze to the obvious tent in the fabric of his underwear. With a wolfish grin, he dove back in, pulling the fabric down to finally expose Brett's aching erection. Their lips locked in a bruising, feral kiss as Joe wrapped his fingers around Brett's cock, his grip firm and confident. Brett moaned, the warmth of Joe's hand enveloping his swollen shaft and sending a jolt of pleasure through him. But as if sensing that Brett was on the verge of losing control, Joe released him, only to slide further down his body. With a seductive glint in his eyes, Joe pushed Brett down on the bench, his legs dangling off the edge. Brett offered no resistance as he allowed Joe to spread his legs, the cool air caressing his exposed thighs. Joe's fingers traced a teasing path up Brett's leg, the anticipation building with each inch that they inched closer to his ass. When Joe finally reached his destination, he lingered there for a moment, pressing his thumb into the soft, tender flesh. Brett's breathing grew shallow as Joe's finger made contact with his entrance, sending a shiver of anticipation coursing through his veins. Joe teased him relentlessly, circling the tight pucker and occasionally applying pressure. The erotic torment continued until Brett's hips bucked, silently pleading for more.
God, yes, Joe,
he murmured, the words leaving his lips in a breathless whisper. Joe smirked at Brett's response, reveling in the power he held over him. He finally granted Brett's request, plunging his thumb inside the tight passage. Brett's back arched off the bench as the digit breached him, filling him with a feeling of fullness he hadn't anticipated. His muscles clenched around the invading digit, memories of past rendezvous flooding his mind, fueling his excitement. Joe's thumb danced along Brett's prostate, sending shock waves of ecstasy coursing through his body. He continued to circle and tease the bundle of nerves, drawing out a symphony of gasps and whimpers from the man writhing beneath him. But Joe's thumb was only the beginning of the pleasures yet to come. With expert precision, Joe positioned himself behind Brett, nudging his legs further apart. Brett, eager and willing, spread his legs wide and arched his back, allowing Joe full access to his eager asshole. Brett heard the rustle of fabric as Joe sheathed himself in latex, the crinkling sound sending a jolt of anticipation straight to his core. Joe positioned himself, the blunt head of his manhood pressing gently against Brett's entrance, and then, with a firm, steady thrust, Joe slid his cock into Brett's waiting hole. Brett's eyes rolled back in his head as he was filled completely, the foreign sensation of the dildo stretching him beyond anything he had ever experienced. Joe's grip tightened on Brett's hips, steadying him as he began to thrust. Each powerful stroke sent ripples of pleasure coursing through Brett's body, his muscles clenching and unclenching around the Joe's cock, desperate to draw it deeper. Their heavy breaths mingled in the dim light, drowned out by the slapping of flesh against flesh and the filthy words spilling from their lips. With each powerful stroke, Joe's cock drove deeper into Brett's willing asshole, sending a fresh wave of pleasure crashing over him. Brett's own cock, trapped in the confines of his boxer briefs, throbbed relentlessly, a prisoner of its own desire. Joe's thrusts became wilder, harder, the force of each impact sending shock waves of pleasure rippling through Brett's body. The friction between them grew, the smell of sweat and sex hung heavy in the air, a testament to their unspoken passion. As they writhed together, the world outside the storage room seemed to fade away, replaced by a tunnel of pure, unadulterated lust. Every thought was lost to the overwhelming surge of pleasure coursing through them, their hearts pounding in time with each other. Brett screamed in pleasure as Joe pounded him hard, the force of each thrust pushing him closer and closer to the brink. Joe's movements became erratic, his thrusts desperate, each one pushing Brett further into the euphoria of the moment. He could feel himself on the verge, the tension coiling tighter and tighter within him until finally, with one final powerful surge, the dam broke. Brett cried out, his climax tearing through him like a tempest, a torrent of pleasure that threatened to drown him. His cock pulsed and spasmed, sending a fountain of cum cascading over his chest and stomach, painting a messy portrait of their forbidden tryst. Joe's own orgasm followed swiftly after, a white-hot explosion that radiated from his balls and through his entire being. With a final, shuddering thrust, he emptied himself into the condom, the warmth and weight of his release sending a final shiver of ecstasy coursing through him. As they lay there, spent and panting, the gravity of their actions weighed heavily on both of them. It was a moment of clarity in the midst of the post-orgasmic haze, a silent acknowledgement that what had just transpired between them had forever changed the landscape of their relationship. Brett's mind raced, the voice of his conscience screaming at him to end this toxic cycle, to extricate himself from the grip of temptation before it was too late. But as he pulled away from Joe, he knew that he couldn't abandon this forbidden connection. Not yet. As they dressed, the silence between them was thick with unspoken words and raw emotion. Their hearts beat in time, both men lost in the echoes of the intensely intimate moment they had shared. Finally, Brett broke the silence.
Joe, what happens now?
He asked, his voice strained and barely above a whisper. Joe hesitated for a moment, weighing his response before replying.
I think we take it one day at a time,
he said, his voice softer than before. Brett nodded, unable to find the words to express the turmoil of emotions roiling within him. The rest of the day passed in a blur, the shadow of their illicit encounter hanging over them like an ominous cloud. Chapter 5. Gone fishing. To Jessica, Joe is merely Brett's closest companion, their bond seemingly innocent and devoid of any ulterior motives. Oblivious to the secret desires that simmer beneath the surface, she remains blissfully unaware of the forbidden trysts that unfold in the shadows. While their wives are preoccupied in the kitchen, immersed in gossip and the sweet aroma of baking cookies, Brett and Joe seized the opportunity to indulge in their illicit passions. With a silent agreement born of shared longing, they steal away to a secluded corner where whispered promises and hungry kisses give way to the intoxicating pleasure of secret rendezvous. In the clandestine world they inhabited, Brett and Joe understood the unspoken rule: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Keeping their illicit affair concealed was paramount, a silent pact to preserve the delicate balance of their lives. Despite the gnawing ache of dishonesty that lingered beneath the surface, they were willing to endure the torment to safeguard the fragile harmony they had forged. One sultry afternoon, as the sunlight danced lazily through the windows, Brett descended the stairs and stumbled upon a scene that set his pulse racing. There, in the throes of passion, were his wife entwined with Joe's wife, Karen, their lips locked in a fervent embrace. Surprisingly, Brett felt neither jealousy nor arousal at the sight. Instead, a curious sense of relief washed over him, a realization that he wasn't alone in harboring illicit desires. In the heat of the moment, as he observed the forbidden tryst unfolding before him, a newfound understanding dawned. Perhaps their shared secrets ran deeper than he had ever imagined. With a silent retreat, Brett slipped back upstairs, the image of his wife entangled with Karen seared into his mind. Summoning a facade of nonchalance, he called out to Jessica, his voice a careful blend of innocence and curiosity.
Jessica, honey?
In the ensuing moments, the sound of hurried movements and hushed whispers echoed from below, a telltale sign of the scene unfolding in the living room. Descending once more, Brett found Jessica and Joe's wife seated on the couch, the air thick with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the pretense of normalcy. Though his heart hammered with the weight of their shared secret, Brett played his part in the charade, masking his turmoil behind a practiced smile as he joined them, the truth of their illicit desires hidden beneath the surface of their seemingly ordinary afternoon. While Jessica remained oblivious to Brett's clandestine encounters with Joe, Brett found himself privy to the tantalizing secrets shared between the two ladies. Despite the temptation to reveal his own forbidden desires, Brett resolved to keep Joe in the dark, unwilling to disrupt the delicate balance of their intricate web of secrecy. Yet, as the complexities of their intertwined lives unfolded before him, Brett's longing for Joe's Herculean physique intensified, each clandestine rendezvous fueling a primal hunger that stirred within him. The forbidden allure of Joe's powerful form beckoned to him, a siren's call that grew stronger with each passing day, tempting Brett to explore the depths of their shared desires in the shadows of their carefully crafted facades. With a subtle flicker of anticipation in his eyes, Brett addressed Jessica, his voice laced with a suggestive undertone.
Honey, I'm heading out for a fishing trip with Joe tomorrow. Need me to pick up anything special on our way back?
Jessica's response, delivered with a coy smile, only added fuel to the fire of Brett's desires.
If you can reel in some king salmon, that would be perfect.
She purred, her words dripping with innuendo.
And if not, grab some Atlantic salmon on your way back. Oh, and don't forget the butter.
She added, her suggestive tone lingering in the air like a lingering caress.
I won't be home until 8 in the morning tomorrow.
As the first light of dawn kissed the sky, the anticipation of their fishing expedition stirred within Brett's core. With the crack of dawn, he gathered his gear, each item a potent reminder of the adventures that awaited him. In the soft glow of morning, Brett made his way to Joe's driveway, his steps quickened by the promise of what lay ahead. There, amidst the tranquil stillness of the morning, Joe busied himself with hooking his pontoon trailer to his truck, the metallic clinks echoing like a symphony of anticipation. Their destination beckoned from the north, a few hours' journey from Sacramento, nestled near Redding, where the promise of king salmon tantalized their senses. In the quiet moments before departure, Brett's pulse quickened with excitement, his mind already drifting to the thrill of the chase and the primal satisfaction of reeling in their prized catch. With synchronized movements honed by years of companionship, Brett and Joe hauled the sleek pontoon from its resting place and guided it towards the water's edge. Each exertion of their muscles, each bead of sweat glistening in the morning light, served as a testament to the primal energy that pulsed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the shared desires that simmered beneath the surface. As the engine hummed to life, propelling them into the tranquil waters, Brett and Joe sought out a secluded haven, a sanctuary where their desires could roam free without fear of prying eyes. With practiced ease, they navigated the pontoon to the water's edge, where the gentle lapping of the waves provided a soothing backdrop to their burgeoning passion. In the intimate embrace of their secluded sanctuary, lips met in a hungry kiss, tongues intertwining in a dance of longing and lust. Hands roamed freely, exploring the contours of each other's bodies with an insatiable hunger, fingers tracing the lines of desire that etched across heated skin. Suddenly, Joe's hand reached down, closing possessively around the length of Brett's swollen cock, a slow grin spreading across his lips as he felt the heat and weight of it pulsing in his grip. Brett gasped, his hips bucking involuntarily as Joe began to stroke him, the rhythmic motion sending jolts of electricity coursing through his veins. With each pump of Joe's hand, Brett felt himself sinking deeper into a sea of pleasure, a heady cocktail of longing and lust. Abandoning themselves to the whims of their desire, Brett and Joe surrendered to the primal energy that surged between them. The pontoon, anchored to the water's edge, bobbed gently as the two men reveled in the exquisite sensation of skin against skin. Brett's hands wandered with unrestrained passion, tracing the tantalizing contours of Joe's muscular chest as he claimed his mouth in a carnal kiss. Their lips crushed together, a fierce battle of want and need, fueling the fire that threatened to consume them both. As Brett reached under Joe's shirt, the warmth of Joe's hardened muscles ignited a spark of desire within him. His fingertips danced across the rigid lines of Joe's stomach, eliciting a low groan that reverberated through the air, mixing with the gentle lullaby of the lapping water. As they broke apart for breath, Joe pulled off his shirt, allowing Brett a glimpse of the glistening six-pack that lay beneath the fabric. With a tantalizing slowness, Brett trailed his lips down Joe's torso, his tongue darting out to taste the salty bead of sweat that lingered on Joe's heated flesh. With each lap of his tongue, Brett's excitement surged, his heart racing as he ventured lower, his lips hovering just above Joe's straining erection. And then, with a sudden hunger that could no longer be contained, Brett wrapped his lips around Joe's pulsating length, drawing him deep into the warm, wet embrace of his mouth. Joe's back arched as he surrendered to the overwhelming pleasure, the sensation of Brett's lips around his throbbing member, igniting a wildfire of lust within him. Brett, meanwhile, reveled in the exquisite taste of Joe's cock, his tongue swirling skillfully around the sensitive tip. Brett teased and tantalized, exploring every inch of his lover's length, his hand expertly cupping and caressing Joe's heavy balls. Joe's fingers threaded through Brett's hair, guiding the rhythm of his ministrations, urging him to take more of him in. Moans and heavy breaths filled the air as Brett complied, the silken warmth of his throat engulfing Joe's straining shaft. With each stroke, Brett's lips slid further down, his cheeks hollowed, creating a vacuum of pleasure that drove Joe wild. He felt Joe's hips begin to rock, the pace of their movements quickening, becoming more desperate as they hurtled toward climax. Brett reached up to fondle Joe's nipples, rolling them gently between his fingers, the sensitivity of the tiny buds making Joe's cock twitch in his mouth. Joe's breath caught in his throat, a guttural growl rumbling through his chest as he reveled in the sensation of Brett's lips wrapped around him. Brett's tongue danced along the underside of Joe's shaft, tracing the thick vein that pulsed with every beat of his heart. The taste of Joe's desire, musky and salty, filled his mouth as he swallowed, the sensation of his lover's essence coating his throat, making his own cock throb with need. But Brett was not yet done with his exploration of Joe's body, and with slow, deliberate movements, he worked his way down, tracing a path of wet kisses along the sensitive skin of Joe's inner thigh. Brett's hands slid downwards, fingers teasing and tickling as they went, inching ever closer to their final destination. He paused, his lips hovering just above the object of his attention, savoring the anticipation of the moment. Joe's breath came in ragged gasps, the tension of his desire building steadily with every passing second. And then, With a soft sigh, he surrendered, relaxing into the sensation as Brett's warm, wet tongue danced over the sensitive head of his cock. Brett explored the length of Joe's erection with his tongue, teasing and tantalizing, savoring the taste of his lover's desire. The intensity of the pleasure made Joe's legs tremble, his hands clenching the edge of the pontoon seat as he struggled to maintain his composure. Brett's lips slid down over the swollen head of Joe's cock, taking him deep into his mouth. The sensation of Brett's throat closing around him was indescribable, and Joe let out a low groan, his hips thrusting upwards instinctively. Brett's tongue swirled around Joe's shaft, teasing and tantalizing as he sucked him deeper into his mouth. The rhythm of his movements became more urgent, his mouth sliding faster and faster up and down Joe's cock. With deliberate intent, Brett's hands traced a path of desire down Joe's body, each touch igniting a fiery trail of sensation. He lingered at Joe's balls, caressing them with a tender touch that elicited a low, guttural moan of pleasure. Moving lower still, Brett's tongue danced across Joe's perineum, teasing the sensitive flesh with a feather-light touch that sent shivers of anticipation coursing through him. But it was when Brett's touch ventured lower, towards the most intimate of places, that Joe's breath caught in his throat. With a boldness born of desire, Brett explored the delicate contours of Joe's sensitive hole, his touch both gentle and insistent, coaxing forth a symphony of pleasure that echoed through their secluded sanctuary. With a seductive gleam in his eyes, Brett coated his throbbing member with slick lubricant, the cool sensation sending shivers of anticipation coursing through him. Positioning himself at Joe's eager entrance, he pressed forward with a firm yet gentle insistence, the head of his cock teasingly nudging against the sensitive flesh, seeking entry into the warm, welcoming depths beyond. Brett paused, savoring the moment as his lover's body opened up to him, surrendering to the overwhelming sensation of fullness. As he pushed deeper inside, he felt the walls of Joe's passage enveloping him, the velvety heat a tantalizing embrace that threatened to unravel his self-control. Joe's back arched, a ragged gasp escaping his lips as he welcomed the invasion of Brett's thickness. The stretch and burn of the intrusion, a potent reminder of the forbidden delights they had been indulging in, sent waves of pleasure crashing through his body, threatening to drown him in a sea of ecstasy. Their bodies moved together in a slow, deliberate rhythm, a dance of desire that had been months in the making. With each deliberate thrust, Brett plunged deeper into Joe's willing embrace, the sensation of their bodies melding together, sending waves of ecstasy coursing through them both. Slow and deliberate, he withdrew until only the tip of his throbbing member remained within Joe's tight heat, before surging forward once more in a single, unhurried motion. The languid rhythm of their union elicited moans of pleasure from Joe's lips, his eyes rolling back in blissful surrender to the intoxicating sensation of Brett, filling him completely. Each slow, deep penetration sent shockwaves of pleasure rippling through their entwined bodies, a symphony of desire that echoed through the secluded sanctuary of their shared passion. In the intimate embrace of their sensual union, Brett moved with the grace of a seasoned dancer, his hips swaying in a seductive rhythm as he slid in and out of Joe's welcoming warmth. Each movement was a masterful choreography of desire, fluid and deliberate, as if they were engaged in a slow, erotic dance. With every thrust, Brett's body melded seamlessly with Joe's, their movements synchronized in a hypnotic rhythm that echoed the pulsating beat of their shared passion. Each glide in and out was a tantalizing caress, igniting a symphony of pleasure that reverberated through the air, a testament to the intense connection between them. In a daring display of intimacy, Brett took Joe's hands in his own and guided them to his chest, encouraging him to caress his sensitive nipples with tantalizing strokes. In response, Brett reciprocated the gesture, his fingertips tracing delicate circles over Joe's own hardened peaks. As their bodies moved in perfect synchrony, the added sensation of their nipples being teased and tantalized heightened the intensity of their union. With each penetrating thrust, Joe teetered on the edge of ecstasy, the dual stimulation pushing him ever closer to the brink of release. With a rhythm as precise as a symphony conductor's baton, Brett drove into Joe with flawless precision, each thrust a testament to their shared passion and desire. As their bodies moved in unison, they engaged in a tantalizing dance of pleasure, their hands wandering over each other's heated skin, fingers teasing and tantalizing sensitive nipples with fervent strokes. Locked in a gaze as intense as a flame, Brett and Joe stared into each other's eyes, their souls laid bare in the raw intensity of the moment. In that intimate connection, they found a profound understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the depths of their desire and the intensity of their union.
I'm coming.
Joe's breathless murmur filled the air, his voice thick with arousal, as waves of pleasure surged through him. With each pulsating contraction of his slick, wet hole, Joe's muscles clenched and squeezed around Brett's massive erection, drawing him deeper into the throes of ecstasy. With an affirmative nod, Brett maintained unbroken eye contact with Joe, their connection deepening as the intensity of their passion soared. As Joe released a small, tantalizing spurt of pleasure, Brett continued his rhythmic strokes, coaxing forth another wave of ecstasy from his trembling lover.
Fuck yeah, keep going!
Joe's husky voice urged, the command fueling Brett's own desire as they surrendered to the throes of their shared pleasure. With synchronized movements, they rode the crest of their climax, each explosion of ecstasy amplifying the intensity of the other's release. Their orgasms unfolded in perfect harmony, a symphony of sensation that washed over them in slow, controlled waves, heightening the peak of their pleasure and leaving them both trembling in the aftermath of their shared euphoria. In the stillness that followed, Brett's chest heaved with exertion, sweat glistening on his tanned skin, while Joe's lithe form lay spent and satisfied, his eyes half closed in blissful surrender. Brett's body, now relaxed and at peace, slid bonelessly from the depths of Joe's warmth, his flaccid members slick with their combined desires. He lay down beside Joe, pulling their entwined limbs into a tender embrace, as if reluctant to break the connection that had brought them to the brink of ecstasy.
That was hot,
Brett murmured, his voice heavy with emotion and awe. The words seemed inadequate to convey the depth of his feelings, the raw intensity of their connection. Joe turned to look at Brett, his deep green eyes softening with affection and understanding. As if pulled by a magnetic force, Brett leaned in, his heart pounding in his chest as he closed the distance between them. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden rays through the winding river, bathing the two men in a warm, ethereal glow as Brett's lips met Joe's in a passionate kiss. Their lips moved in a slow, deliberate dance, a reaffirmation of the bond they had forged in the shadows of their carefully crafted facades. Brett's hands reached up, cradling Joe's face, his thumb gently tracing the line of Joe's jaw as he deepened their kiss. Unable to contain the weight of his wife's secret any longer, Brett found himself compelled to confide in Joe, the truth burning within him like a smoldering ember. With a heavy heart and a sense of urgency, he revealed to Joe the forbidden tryst between Jessica and Karen, Joe's own wife.
I've been aware for some time,
Joe admitted, his voice tinged with a mixture of resignation and desire. His relationship with Karen was a complex web of tangled desires and forbidden pleasures, a delicate dance between secrecy and indulgence. In their unconventional arrangement, the rules were clear. While their relationship was open, discretion was paramount, and the risk of discovery loomed over their every clandestine encounter. Karen shared Joe's desire for secrecy, understanding the delicate balance they must maintain to keep their forbidden desires hidden from prying eyes.
I wonder if my wife is onto us.
Brett mused aloud, the thought of their illicit trysts lingering in the air like a forbidden whisper. With a knowing smirk, Joe replied, his voice dripping with anticipation.
Best not to mention it. The thrill of getting caught, the risk of discovery, it's what makes it all so fucking exciting.
The unspoken understanding between them added an electric charge to their encounters, each stolen moment filled with the tantalizing possibility of being caught in the act. The intoxicating blend of danger and desire heightened their arousal. Together, Brett and Joe embraced their forbidden passion, indulging in stolen moments of pleasure that ignited their senses and fed their hunger for something more, Each tantalizing tryst invigorated their minds and bodies as they immersed themselves in an exquisite dance of extraordinary desire. Their secret rendezvous became a tantalizing game of cat and mouse as they indulged in the thrill of the forbidden in the hidden corners of their backyards.